All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our backup and disaster recovery webinar. I'm Marsha Buckner. I'm the head of sales and marketing here at Resolve IT. And we're going to get started by just sharing a few house rules or housekeeping notes, right? We're going to just have all the mics muted, which there are now. We're going to address Q&A at the end of the session, maybe around 10:15. We'll do Q&A for 15 minutes. Everybody on the list here or who registered will in fact get a copy of the recording, and it will be shared on our various platforms for you guys to actually go over at another time if you don't get to stay the entirety of the hour and a half. And we do have a giveaway, which is our first 10 persons who registered. They will be getting a free backup and disaster recovery assessment from Resolve IT. So before I move on, I am sharing on the screen the agenda of what the next hour and a half will look like. And I am going to start off by welcoming Almando, who is the CEO of Resolve IT. For more than 20 years, Almando has been helping businesses across Jamaica and the Caribbean leverage technology. Let me actually go to his slide so you see what he looks like in case you don't know, right? So he's been helping businesses all over leverage technology, improve security, resilience, operational efficiencies. Under his leadership, Resolve IT has become a trusted Microsoft partner, an Acronis Gold Solutions partner, and one of the region's leading providers of cybersecurity, cloud, and business continuity solutions. Almando is recognized as a thought leader and is a regular speaker on topics including digital transformation, cybersecurity, and AI. And of course, today he'll be joined by a senior solutions engineer from Acronis for a fireside chat where they'll discuss practical strategies for protecting your business from cyber attacks, hardware failures, natural disasters, and other unexpected disruptions. I'm going to go to our Stephen Nichols, who is from Acronis, is who will be joining Almando. And a little bit about Stephen here. He enjoys theater, designing and building sets, technical productions, and stage management. I didn't know all of this, Stephen, but maybe one day you'll have to do a little skit or something for me. I've also He's also been known to spend a little time on stage. And of course, he loves cosplay, he loves Disney, he loves to travel, hiking, photography. He enjoys a little bit of everything, and he does enjoy fine scotch, good food, and contagious laughter. So join me, guys, in welcoming both Stephen and Almando to get this started.
Excellent. Happy to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation and hopefully sharing some insights on data protection and business continuity with all the folks that have joined us today. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so
Great,
much.
great. That laughter, I can tell you, Marsha. Yes, Stephen laughter is contagious. All right, guys. Good morning, everyone. I do appreciate your time and your promptness, and we are looking forward to have, I think, a valuable discussion on the topic. And I might just start to say why. Why are you investing your time in this webinar today? And I'm just going to summarize that for you shortly. Over 20 years now, working as a digital transformation and IT practitioner, I have seen many instances of failures, right? And if we should just look back at the last year, say from 2025 to 2026 in the Caribbean. Look at the different cyber attacks that made the news. A couple of them I've done my own research, and I would have spoken with the persons internally to get an idea of what's going on. And, you know, many of what happened is that if persons had invested just a little more in securing their data, then they would have a better outcome. And so in this case, we want to spend some of our time talking about that little that you can do to give you big impact. We have seen persons who go ahead and wiped all their machines and then they restore their data. We have seen persons who didn't know what to do and it took them a month or two to recover. We have seen persons recover in a week, right? And the reality is your backup is your last defense when it comes to disaster recovery and protecting your data. So we're going to talk a little more about that. How do we do that in practice? And we're going to have a discussion about it. So I'm going to start by speaking with Stephen. Stephen, we coincidentally, we are in the hurricane season. And we still have Hurricane Melissa fresh in our heads. That was just the last quarter of 2025. Why is it that hurricane is one of our biggest risks as businesses?
So, you know, it's about business continuity, right? So it's about being able to continue to do business. And whenever you've got a destructive force like a hurricane, you have the risk that power may not be available. You have the risk that there may be physical damage to buildings, and buildings that's where the data resides, right? It's sitting on servers in those buildings, and as well, there may be interruptions in connectivity and things like that. And so being able to have a solution in place ahead of time can protect you from that. But it's also understanding what are those risks, right? Understanding what are the business critical systems that you've got? What are those applications? Depending on the what business you're in, there may be different things that if you have people that you have to manage and send out to do work, right? Whether that's construction or even taxi, whatever it is, any kind of where you've got dispatch software. Without that, you can't do business. And so having a plan in place becomes really important because even once the dust has settled, even once the power comes back on, if you don't have access to the data and access to the applications you need to run the business, you're not only did you have the impact of the actual hurricane, but now you have a longer impact, a longer time to be able to get back to business. And ultimately, that's the thing we're trying to protect against, right? Is being able to do business, be able to transact, and able to actually run.
So it's interesting because you see, during the hurricane season, it's not just the impact of the hurricane, it's also the preparation. And you said it like what happened after. So really, the risk is before, during, and after, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we notice a lot is that when there's a pending hurricane, the resources are shift from the regular duties to preparedness.
Yes.
So because of that, you find persons neglecting their regular duties. So persons who would normally review logs, for example, are now on the preparation team. And so things that are supposed to be handled, not handled during that time. And I'll add another point to what you said. And what we saw as well, and it became a lot more clear last year, is risk or the increase of phishing attacks during that time and fake sites. So in Jamaica, for example, what we saw was there was a lot of donation sites that spun up purporting to be a representative of a government agency or from nonprofit or something like that, right? You would have had emails going in to say this is coming from a trusted source. Click this now. So indeed, bad actors will take disadvantage of the opportunity to say, well, person's not paying attention anymore. Let's go in and try and make a move. So indeed, I align with that. But with that said, what does a unprepared business look like?
So surprisingly, a lot of businesses aren't good at gauging whether they're prepared or not. So if you're looking from the inside, a prepared business and an unprepared business might feel the same because you might think you've done what you need to do.
Yeah.
But a prepared business, I would argue that most businesses aren't in the business of IT. They're in the business of selling goods, providing services, and so they're what they see as prepared, right, is not necessarily what IT people would look at and say is prepared. So a prepared business is one that has a good understanding of the risks, has a plan to mitigate those risks, and then has tested or tried that plan in an environment where that risk is not actually either happening or imminent. One of the analogies that I like to talk about that helps kind of to kind of that people can understand easily is the first time that you ever evacuate a building from a fire alarm generally isn't when there's a fire, it's when there's a fire drill. And that's because you want to be able to observe, and you want to be able to make sure that, entrances aren't blocked and make sure that people know where to go and all of those things. And I think a well-prepared business from a business continuity point of view, that's the piece where we see a lot of people not realizing that they're not prepared, as they haven't, they may have something in place. Maybe they've backed up their systems. Maybe they haven't someone that they've talked to, but they haven't necessarily completely understood the risk. And they also often miss that testing, that validation to make sure that their plan is going to work.
And as you mentioned plan, we are going to be talking more about that a little later. What should the plan look like? A matter of fact, we'll be sharing a lot more of even a framework to help the attendees to navigate this. And you're right, because sometimes having a discussion with persons and we said, okay, well, how ready you are? Oh yeah, we good. All right. When last have you tested? I'm not sure, but I'm sure it's been done. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, So let's turn our attention to then a standard that exists. It's called the 3210 backup rule, right? Many persons are aware of, well, some persons are aware of it, but most persons are more familiar with the 3-2-1 rule. Not long ago, this rule was revised or updated, just like how IT evolved, and a 0 was added to it, right?
Yep.
Talk to us about the 3210 backup rule. What is it really, and why should business pay attention?
Yeah, so I think a lot of a lot of places realize that you have to have a backup, right? That's not news to people, right? You've got your primary source of your data. You've got whether that's a server or whatever, where things are, and most people go, oh, I've got to have a backup just in case something happens to the original. But especially when we're talking about disaster recovery, when we're talking about business continuity, there's a better formula that actually gets you to the point where you're properly protected, and that's you want to have 3 copies of your data, right? So you want to have your primary copy, right? That's the one you're using every day. You want to have a backup copy of that data. Matter of fact, you want 2 backups, and the reason is when we get to the 2, you want them in 2 different places, right? So it's important that you have ideally one of those, that's the one, is in the cloud, in a completely different location than you're in, that is protected, that is not going to be vulnerable to the same disasters or challenges that the primary data is going to be. So that first backup can make it really easy to recover. That can just be on a different server in your own data center. It could be it's somewhere that's easy to recover. That second copy, just in case those two copies get damaged, and ideally in the cloud. Now the zero that's new, I think this is something that again talks to that people think they're more prepared than they are, and that is the zero means it really referring to zero errors or zero problems with those backups, and that talks a lot to having backup validation and testing and making sure that if there is a problem, you're finding out before you need to use the backup, right? Because backing up is part of a process, but really it's about business continuity. It's about being able to maintain the business, being able to recover the data. And just because you have set up some software to make a copy of the data somewhere else doesn't give that high degree of confidence that when something happens, because it's going to happen, right? Whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a ransomware attack, like there are multiple things. Something is going to happen at some point to your data, and making sure that you're following that 3-2-1-0 approach gives you that framework so that you can have a high degree of confidence that not only do you have the data, but you can recover it.
Good point. Not only that you have the data, because unfortunately, so I gave you the example of maybe the last 5 organization had a disaster. I'm going to say a data disaster in Jamaica. These are people who are in the news, right? I think there were some from finance. There was a credit union. There was a couple of government agencies. And here's the thing. They all have backup, Stephen.
Yep, I'm sure they did.
But when they went for that backup, the backup wasn't good. So to kind of emphasize the zero in that 3-2-1-0 rule is to move away the assumption that you have a backup.
Yep.
Yeah. So even though the log says success, you want to verify. Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to kind of put that out there. But we have different stages of different sizes of business and organization on this call.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking if we should simplify this, because sometimes persons have this psychological, I would say a psychological impact or impair when it comes to tech.
Mm-hmm.
They just say, boy, tech is for computer science degrees and they can't navigate it. And I want to simplify really what could a small business do, let's say in a week time, to improve their backup. Today is Wednesday. By next Wednesday, what really can they do to improve their data resilience and their business continuity?
So the first thing I would look at if I was advising a small business on how to do that is find an IT partner that is an expert in doing that, because there's some large organizations have IT budgets. They have people on board, and sometimes they may need some direction, some assistance, some expertise. But for small businesses, a lot of the small businesses that I work with, they might have the tech person. It's not their main role, but they're the person who knows the most about technology. But they don't necessarily have the expertise. So the first thing I would say is, if you're a small business, then it would be to partner with an MSP that can provide you with that level of expertise. It's what they do all day. It's like what you guys do all day. It's you understand the risks and you know how to mitigate them. So, and then one of the other things that I would also highly recommend is simply to put a plan in place with a regular frequency to test those backups, because I think that's the biggest thing that people are missing today. Certainly making sure you've got a cloud copy, right? Just in case that would be something else. If you're only backing up, maybe you're backing up to an external hard drive, or you're backing up to another location, inside the business.
Mm-hmm.
In that order, I would say partner with an expert who can give you the real feedback on what you should do. Have a plan in place to test those regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't tested them, maybe that's the first thing I would do, is try restoring from a backup and make sure that it actually works. And then the third thing would be, if you're not backing up to the cloud today, if you're only backing up locally, to add a cloud location for those backups, because from both sides of the risk, when you talk about a weather event, or some other, or some kind of fire or physical damage to a building, or if you talk about a ransomware attack, a lot of the times the first thing that somebody, if a threat actor gets inside an organization, one of the first things they're going to look for to target is
Your
your
backup.
backups.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a cloud version of those backups in both of those cases, that's your
Mm-hmm.
last line of defense, right?
Yeah.
That's your ability. You got it immutable, it can't be changed, it's in the cloud, and at least that data is secure.
Okay, so you mentioned a few stuff here, and I want to drill into those because we're not taking anything for granted today, Stephen. So you've talking about the cloud backup. You mentioned external hard drive. We call that on-prem. And then what if we want to have both? We call that hybrid. But let's dive into that.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, where should people put their data, really? Should they keep it at the office? Should they keep it only in the cloud? What's really the right way to approach this thing?
So I'm a big proponent of hybrid, right? That's always been my approach. So there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that there's a lot of advantage to having a local copy of your data for that's for your day-to-day restores, right? That a lot of the time that is someone deleted a file accidentally and you need to be able to recover it. Now you're not worried about, how long it's going to take to download that file. It's very, very fast. It's efficient. And you also control, you have the data sovereignty of that. You know where the data is, and it's really accessible. So there's some advantages to local, for sure, from that point of view. But as we've talked about, that risk mitigation strategy only works as long as that local data and the local backup isn't exposed to the same risks as the primary data. And the reality is that they are. And so I think it's also important to have a copy of that data somewhere else, and ideally is geographically dispersed from where you are, so that it is less likely to be exposed to the same risks, right? So having that in a data center that is outside of the same geographic area. And the other thing is that I also feel that being able to have a disaster recovery plan in place for that data. So not just being able to recover it, because especially in the case of a major weather event like a hurricane, it could be an extended period of time without reliable internet, without reliable power, without having your local devices being able to be replaced or whatever. So being able to at least those critical workloads, being able to access them while they're in the cloud without having to download them from the cloud, is also important. And that's why I think the hybrid is the best. And it doesn't mean that you have to have, because a lot of people, when they think of DR, they think about having to have like a whole other set of infrastructure, right, somewhere. And but the reality is, with modern solutions, like the ones that we offer, that you offer from us, allow you to leverage those cloud backups and only and then spin those up in the cloud, and that gives you that business continuity. So it gives you another layer of defense,
So I'm going to
so
touch
that
on that.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
which is why I believe hybrid gives you the best risk mitigation strategy.
So thank you for that. So here's the thing. So we summarize this in short. Hybrid is the best of both worlds.
Yes.
The world of having your data on premise and the world of having your data off premise, but ideally not just off premise, but in a different geographical space. All right. So that's clear. But there are two things that I want us to address frontally. One, we have persons who have synced their stuff with OneDrive or Google Drive, G Drive, and they said, "Hey, I have a sync. Is that backup?"
No, not
Tell
at
us
all.
why not.
So that is absolute. That's convenience. That gives you the ability that if you are, if your device, your end, becomes, unaccessible to you. Maybe you spill coffee on your laptop, and you go get a new device. You're not going to lose the data from that. But it makes it easier to access across multiple devices. There's lots of advantages to doing that cloud sync. Um, but it's only backing up some very specific data, right? It's not actually it doesn't give you that business continuity. And on top of that, there when you have a need to be able to recover that data, having it on multiple locations is better than only having it in one location, but it's not the same as actually having a strategy. A matter of fact, if you talk about Microsoft, for example, you mentioned OneDrive. If you look at their T's and C's, like their terms and conditions, there's something called the shared responsibility model, and that basically means Microsoft commits to having a service availability. That means that they say, we'll make sure we can deliver your email to a certain SLA. We'll make sure that the synchronization works in a certain way. But you, as the owner of that data, it's your responsibility to make sure that data is properly backed up. So right in their T's and C's, they recommend a third-party backup. And that's because they know one of the challenges with syncing is if a file is deleted or corrupted in one place, that deletion and corruption cascades through the rest of that syncing.
Good point. Good point. So that's one of the points I wanted you to raise on, because synchronizing is taking the same file from its source to its target. Whatever the source does is like what Monkey does in one space, that's the other one we're going to do, right? So
exactly.
And so you want to have a unmodified copy of your data, which is the backup, right? Good point for that. And I also want to also deal with this particular situation of disaster recovery. What's the difference, Stephen, between a backup and a disaster recovery? Because some persons say, hey, I have a backup, but is it the same?
So they're certainly related, right? There's a connection between the two of them. So when we talk about backup, we're just talking a copy of the data. So you maybe what we're doing, we've got things set up and we're making sure that all of the My Documents folder is backed up. And so that, or even if you're backing up the entire device, that's still a backup.
Right.
And when we talk about backup, we talk about it having two pieces: backup and recovery. So if we had to when we have to recover, it's going to take time to move that data from where it's being stored to where you need it to be.
So we have to know factor that you have the right bandwidth,
correct,
to take that restore. So the restoration time, yeah.
Yes.
And also we have to factor that you have a space to take that restore.
Yep.
All right, continue.
And then on top of that, so that can add to an extended downtime, right? And really, it's about the longer you're offline, the more risk, the more cost that's involved
Loss
in
of
that. So
use and so forth. Yeah.
exactly. So what disaster recovery is about is business continuity. It's about being able to, when there's a disaster, whether that's ransomware, whether it's a hurricane, whether,
Mhm.
whether it's an employee, a disgruntled employee who goes and does some damage to a server, whatever it is, the disaster recovery allows you to continue to operate the business, and that means that you now have to think about the what does that server do? What does that data do? How do I access it? How do I use it? And it's making
Mhm.
sure that not just the data is available, but the application is available.
Good
So,
point.
and that's part of what we often refer to as a business continuity or disaster recovery plan, right? And we talk about two important numbers. They're called RTO and
All right.
RPO.
So let's hold that because we're going to go there right into the next segment.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the RTO and the RPO. So to nail this part of the discussion, so what we are saying is, yes, backup is important. That's essentially keeping a copy of your data, even a copy of your system. And we're also saying that the DR is having your system running somewhere else. In essence, we have prepared somewhat a copy of your system or your infrastructure somewhere else, right? So if your core application, let's say your bookkeeping application that
Yep.
generates your invoicing and stuff, if that should go down by many reasons, it could be a hard drive failure, it could be a cyber act, whatever
Mhm.
that is, right? You will have you have the two options to do a restore, or you could do what is called a failover, right? So we're saying when you have disaster recovery infrastructure in place, you could say, okay, my primary system is down. Let's continue to switch over now to work on our secondary system and
Yep.
continue to work while you try and fix the problem with your primary system, right? That's what we're saying, right?
Exactly.
All right,
Exactly.
beautiful. All right, good stuff. So with that, then it means we need a way of doing all of this because, employees change, technology changes. Um, we need a plan. And I heard you say that before. So let's talk about building a DR plan, a disaster recovery plan, right?
Mhm.
Um, so we're saying the backup is the service or the tool. We have just discussed that.
Yep.
But disaster recovery now really is a strategy um, as to how we recover when there is a disruption or an event, right?
Mhm.
Talk about how do we build a disaster recovery plan now. You mentioned some of those already. You were talking about the RTO and the RPO, so you can continue on that vein.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think there's kind of three things that we need to think about when we're building a disaster recovery plan.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I think that's important is understanding which systems are business critical, right? Making sure that like you were saying, maybe it's bookkeeping, maybe it's a line of business application, maybe it's a
Mm-hmm.
CRM. What is it?
Mm-hmm.
What are the applications that
Mm-hmm.
and where
Or
is
the or
that
the service or the
the
service.
service? Yeah,
Ah,
exactly.
got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So what are the things that we need to have that if we can't access those things are going to interrupt our ability to actually run the business? So that's the
Mm-hmm.
first step.
Mm-hmm.
And in most cases, there's going to be a handful of those business critical things that we need to look at. So they're the top priority. It doesn't mean we're not going to have a plan for the other things, but those are the
Mm-hmm.
ones we know that's our priority.
Clear.
And then the second thing we need to understand is um, how often does that data change? How often does that, is it something that's getting updated all the time? Is this,
Mm-hmm.
is there the information, the data, is that something that, if we lost a couple of minutes, a couple of hours, a couple of days of data, it wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily break anything, or is it
Mm-hmm.
really critical that we have? And that is something that we call our recovery point objective, or the RPO.
All
So
right.
how fresh does that data have to be in when we fail over,
Mm-hmm.
in order for it to be valuable and useful? And
Mm-hmm.
then the third thing And this is something that really differentiates a recovery plan from a
Mm-hmm.
disaster recovery plan
Mm-hmm.
is the RTO, and that's the recovery time objective. How long can you be down? How long can that service be unavailable? So if
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about just a recovery plan, I think you mentioned in your introduction, there were some
Mm-hmm.
businesses that were weeks or longer where
Right.
before they were back up and running with their resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that had a financial impact on those businesses. It probably had a reputational impact on those businesses. It certainly, I'm sure it stressed out the people that worked there.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things because
Mm-hmm.
it was, there's a risk involved. And realistically, you need to, when you're putting that plan together, is understand what would be an ideal situation.
Yeah.
Is that a matter of minutes, hours, or weeks? Most people, it's somewhere between a few minutes and a few hours, depending on how critical those systems are.
So I'm going to deal with the white elephant in the room because this is a space where we come and learn and we talk. When you talk to the business owners and IT practitioners go to them and say, hey, what downtime can the business absorb without being disrupted for it to become a big risk? What's the recovery point objective that we can create? What do you think they said? Immediately they start to say, hey, we can't lose anything.
Yep.
We can't afford to have any downtime, right? That's the initial reaction. And I do understand that, right? And I do get the ambition as well. And of course, nobody wants to lose any data or have any downtime.
Yep.
But in reality, um, there's a cost implication, is it? To try to provide the same level of high availability or protection to every single service within the organization, is it?
Absolutely. So it's always a trade-off between risk and cost,
Uh-huh.
right? And so, which is why when I said that first step is identifying those critical systems.
Right.
So, maybe you have some things that are there that you can be, you know, it would be inconvenient, but it wouldn't be necessarily deeply impactful to the business if there was an extended period of downtime. So maybe a recovery plan. We still need to make sure that 3210 is in place for that data because we
Yep.
don't want to
Yep.
ever lose that. That's a problem.
Yep. Yep.
But once we've identified that subset of services and we say these are the ones that are critical, then that allows to balance that risk and the cost.
Yeah. So,
I
mhm.
CPR sort of like an insurance policy, right? It's
Uh-huh.
something you hope you never have to use, but
Uh-huh.
you want to make sure you've got the right coverage in case you do need it.
Beautiful analogy. I couldn't say that line better. Indeed, and I agree 100%. So I want us to then to make sure we take away, which is this important point, that we can do a mix and match, right? We can have a backup only for some data, right? We can have DR for critical systems, right? And
Yep.
maybe there's some data that can have different kinds of backup and backup frequency, right? So for
Yes.
example, instead of backing up something every day, maybe this data doesn't change or is that critical, we could probably back that up every month.
Yes.
That's a decision. And that is where, so that point you raise, which is step number one, to identify your critical systems or service, I think it's a valuable one because in doing so, you're now able to identify, okay, so we have 10 services that service the organization, right? That
Yep.
makes us operate. But really, it's three are critical.
Yep.
So let me put a more, let's say, advanced or modern or high available approach to these three services. Maybe there's another three. It's cool. We can just back that up, right? And
Yep.
if I should lose access to this for a day, 24 hours, it's not detrimental to the business, right?
Right.
And so you kind of put all of that in place and have a more wholesome plan and a more, I'm going to say, economical budget.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because the you know, I think one of the things that holds people back from putting a really good plan in place is that their expectation that it's going to be priced out of what they can afford. And the reality is that by having a really tight plan that's focused on the right things, and by doing that together with with a partner that understands different strategies for different types of data, different types of workloads, that can mean that you can do that in a way that is much more cost effective.
Yeah.
You look at old solutions, it was about if I've got 3 servers here, I need to have 3 servers over there. I need to maintain them. I need to synchronize them all the time. I'm basically replicating all of my cost of my infrastructure that's primary in a second location. With modern solutions like disaster recovery as a service, it allows you to make a much more modest investment and still have that same level of protection, so that when you need to do that failover, those applications are there and you can maintain the business and you can keep the lights on.
I'm going to drill on that a little because I think it's worth highlighting. Traditionally, for you to have an ideal disaster recovery plan to support your business continuity plan, one would have to have more of a duplicate of their system. So earlier, I gave the example of maybe, let's say you have 10 services that the business operate with, but let's say 3 of them are critical. So let's focus on those 3. In the traditional sense, if you have a server hosting your bookkeeping application or stuff at the office, ideally you would get another server and you'll put that somewhere else, what we call a co-location, and we will put that somewhere else with the bookkeeping install on it, and you ship your backup there, right? So if something should happen, you can go there to access the data and operate. Now, with what you just said, and that's why I want to highlight it, with modern disaster recovery as a service, that kind of capital and operational outlay is no longer needed. Yeah.
Right.
Because now you still have your 3 services. And let's be clear, guys, you don't have to be hosting the service on-prem to need to back it up, because you also need to back up your SaaS, for example. And you touched a little piece of it, Stephen, earlier. Microsoft, in its end user license agreement, say in black and white that you are responsible for backing up your Microsoft 365. Persons rely on the uptime of Microsoft, which that's good confidence. But if something goes wrong, you're really on your own, because it's in your agreement that you are responsible for ensuring you back up your email, your OneDrive, your Teams, your SharePoint, to name a few, right? But going back to where I was going, with this modern system that you have just described, now persons will be able to have a co-location virtually.
Yes.
Right? And you would be able to access your virtual space via VPN, a private tunnel, right? Virtual private network, whether from home, whether from the office, and able to still service your clients or operate your business while you work on that restoration or that disruption, right? So I wanted to highlight that, and the cost versus what traditionally was, it's night and day. It's no longer that kind of situation, because you don't need another server, you don't need another capital expenditure. You're able to be able to get that going. So that's cool. There's something else I'd want to share on the topic of the business disaster recovery, building a business disaster recovery plan. We use AI. Who doesn't use AI? I mean, we should use AI, right? To help us with our documentation and stuff. But if you go in Copilot and say, hey, or ChatGPT, give me a disaster recovery plan, a DRP. That's a good start, but is that really the solution, Stephen? And why not?
So, again, I don't think it's a bad starting point, right? It can give you some things to think about, but first of all, a lot of those plans that you're going to get out of those are more the traditional, hot, cold, or hot, warm.
Or generic.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not tailored to your environment.
That's the
right?
part.
So
yeah.
Unless you train that model, unless you input all of the data about what systems are important, why they're important, it can give you some guidelines, right? So I think it's still there's no harm in doing that, because it can give you some things like, but it's not going to tell you what your RPO and RTO should be. It's not going to tell you which systems are critical. So the only way to do that is someone who understands the business together with someone who understands IT and infrastructure and planning. So that's where that partnership comes in, right? Where you can bring in an expert, um, and have those discussions, because a lot of times I find, especially when I talk to small and medium business owners, they don't know what they don't know, right? So
Sure.
there are lots of those pieces, and so they may not be able to put the right information into an AI in order to get out useful information. So
that's important.
Again, no harm in that as a starting point, right? Because what it can do is give you here's the things that you need to think about, and here's the questions you need to answer. Matter of fact, if I was putting a prompt together for, say, Copilot, and I would say, hey, I'm in this type of business, and I'm looking at putting together a disaster recovery plan. Give me a list of questions that I should get answers to before I go and have a conversation with my MSP partner, so that I can make sure I'm prepared. That's a really good use of AI as far as building a DR plan. And you can even use AI to maybe help you answer some of those questions if it knows your business and understands things. But I've often said that AI is a tool. It's not a replacement for expertise and deep knowledge.
Thank you so much for that. So I wanted to kind of pluck that out just now, because absolutely we are a strong evangelist for AI, but it's the use, right? Because it's the garbage in, garbage out things. If your prompting is poor, you're going to get the poor result. And you want to also be conscious. And that example of more starting from a questionnaire and then kind of pull that back in would help in a significant way. So that would be the better approach to, have the AI interrogate you and get the answers.
Yes.
And then that would be able to give you a good output. So perfect. That's exactly what the message I wanted to share there. All right. Well, so now we know, I think many of us know that we need a backup, Stephen. And I also think that many of us, I would like to believe that everyone on this call or watching this, they do have a backup. But what I'm trying to figure out, why is it that businesses are not testing their backups? Why are we waiting for that unfortunate event to find out that the backup isn't working? What's the issue here? What's the challenge? Why are they not doing it? Why not everybody doing it as a standard?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is blind trust in the fact that, hey, I got a message that said my backup completed successfully.
Yeah.
Right. So they're looking at checking boxes.
Mm-hmm.
You know who actually does test their backups? People who have had a problem in the past where they weren't able to recover. Those are the people who tend to test their backups more often than people who haven't. The second thing is, I think there's a lack of understanding of what exactly does testing your backups mean, right? So really what you need a strategy, you need a plan, right? And then the third thing often is limited resources, right? So a lot of times, people don't if you don't have a plan to do it, it's easy to kind of go, oh, I'll just push that off. It's a tomorrow problem. I don't, I've got other things that are more important today that I've got to deal with. And then people put it off until it's, and they don't actually discover it until they need to go and find a file that someone's deleted, or heaven forbid, they have an actual, serious incident that they need to recover from. And then the other thing that I think is sometimes it's just a matter of them assuming that somebody else is doing it, right? If it's a case where if and it's I remember there was I was in like a roadside place where they had a little, buy souvenirs. There was a little sign that said, "If it's everyone's problem, it's no one's problem." And that really, I think, is the case. I think there needs to be kind of by having that plan in place, that should include who is responsible for doing the testing, right? You have to name the person, you have to name the frequency, and you need to define what success looks like, right? Does it mean that you were able to regularly, do a file restore? Did you test a full system restore? Did you test a failover? And how often do you need to do those? Who actually does them? I think it's a little bit of a lack of knowledge, and sometimes people feeling either overwhelmed by not knowing that, or they just assume it's being taken care of.
Yeah, you're right. So a little bit of ignorance, yes. And I'm also saying sometimes it's also the mindset, because if I'm going to use the example of cybersecurity now, right? So would you give an untrained driver the key to your car?
Absolutely
No.
not.
I have the answer to that. Why then would you give an employee a laptop without protection to sit on the network that connects to the internet without security awareness empowerment? See? Yep. So using that same analogy, turn to backup. I think once we get to the stage of saying if your backup is not tested, you don't have a backup.
Yes.
And once
I
you
wish
have that
I wish
mentality,
everyone's mindset would get there. Like, honestly, an
so once you
unvalidated
have
backup
that
isn't a backup.
mentality, once you have that mentality, then yes, you complete that loop, right?
Yep.
So Stephen, I know technology has come a far way when it comes to backup and testing, right?
Yep.
What does a modern backup look like in respect to testing? How is it now making life much easier for persons who would have to go and I know there are some people still using tapes in 2026. I get it.
Yep.
They have to go and retrieve the tapes and do a restore, or they have to go and click on this thing and do a restore, or how is modern backup now helping with that to give that further confidence that your data is not just backed up, but you have validated it, you have checked it,
Yep.
you have tested it. What does that look like in today's world?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Certainly, there are some automated tools that can do that first level of validation in an automated way. So you don't have to think about them. You don't have to do anything. You simply say, hey, on a regular interval, I want to make sure that this backup has been not just set it completed, but it's been validated, right? And so that's where where we'd be looking for the ability to for example, boot up on a full restore, take a screenshot of the logon. Now, is that going to make sure all the data is there? No, but it at least means, hey, the backup is reliable enough that we can get to a boot screen, and the effort once that's set up is almost zero for the customer. That means that now the major responsibility is only, it can be less frequent, right? But that's the point where when we talk about that disaster recovery as a service, right? When we're talking about that being in the cloud, one of the huge advantages is without interrupting anything that's going on the main site, we can actually spin up that in the cloud, right? And we can actually turn that on, and we can make sure that we can get in, all the data is there, it works the way it's supposed to do. And the time it takes to do that, as opposed to going, retrieving tapes, downloading, finding the infrastructure to actually test on, right? All of that. It's just a matter of a few clicks in a console, and we can up and running and make sure that everything is the way where it needs to be.
Great, great. So what I'm hearing is some of the heavy lifting and the administrative hours that are normally required traditionally to do the testing, which is some of the reasons why testings are not done, right? Can now be automated, yes?
Yes.
And okay, great. Love to hear that. That's beautiful. All right. So I think we have discussed quite a bit of things here, Stephen, that could create value for our attendees and persons who are watching or will be streaming this. You mentioned something that I think I probably should highlight a little more. That was you spoke about my term now, non-disruptive testing.
Yep.
So you said, hey, you could spin up the thing, you could test it and so forth. I wanted to kind of just emphasize that a little, because especially for regulated organizations who need to achieve compliance in doing their show that their backup is working or their disaster recovery is working. And naturally, I mean, I'll say to persons, even if you're not regulated, you should onboard best practices, right?
Yes.
Because that give you that further confidence that you're good when you need it. But continue on that vein, there are times where the reason why compliance is even an issue and testing, I already mentioned the administrative hours and the work that is required to put in. Now you're talking about you're able to test a system as if there were a disaster.
Hey,
Like,
Almando,
hey,
I
Marsha.
just wanted to make sure everyone was hearing him. Yeah, no, I'm just making sure everyone's hearing you. You were breaking up on my end, but maybe it's my end. So,
That sounded fine to me, but so I don't know if it's just on your end or maybe it's someone.
okay.
Yeah.
All
So
right, no problem. Sorry
Okay.
to break that train of
No,
thought. Go ahead,
no
Almando.
issues, no issues. Maybe it's a good test now to hear from persons in the chat to see if
Yeah,
maybe,
and
yeah,
questions.
I would hate to have all this niceness go. So let's do a quick check. Can you hear me, guys? Check. Are we good?
Can go thumbs up
I'm
if you
not
guys
seeing the
have any
chat.
questions.
loud and clear.
Okay.
All right, there we
See,
go.
All right. Beautiful.
Loud and clear.
All right.
great,
Excellent.
loud and clear.
All right. Good stuff. So with that said, then I wanted to kind of highlight the non-disruptive test, Stephen, testing.
Yes.
Where we can modern way of doing things now. We can bring up your banking system. We can bring up your bookkeeping system, whatever it is. We can simulate what will happen
Yep.
if there is a fire or something, your machine crashed.
Yep.
Or your hard drive failed, whatever the thing is, the event, we're planning for it, right? You spoke about the insurance, yes. So we are testing that, and we could say, even in an inconspicuous way where the users don't even know, right? But just maybe the risk managers or maybe the business owners know, right? And so you have now switched over, yeah? Spin up your test environment. You're checking it to see what's going on. or having persons just work in the test environment alone, getting that further confidence that, see, this is it, system is good, this is how we operate if there's a need to declare a disaster. And that further not just give you confidence that your system and your data is intact, but it also helps to empower and educate the workforce, don't it? Because
Yes.
now they know what to do. You mentioned the drill about the
Yes.
fire earlier, right?
Yep.
This is now, so to speak, the DR drill, disaster recovery drill, as what should happen if we have a IT outage. This is how we operate, right?
Yep.
And I wanted, you touched on it a little, but I didn't want it to kind of just get buried in our conversation. So I just kind of want to pluck that out. Not sure if you wanted to add anything else to that, Stephen.
No, I think you covered it fairly well. It is really about having that confidence. It's about being able to do that testing in, as you said, a non-disruptive way, right? So um, it doesn't require you to, you know, plan in advance and tell all your customers that we're closed for a day to be able to do this. It's
Right.
something that you can, while your normal run of business is going on, you can also make sure you're very well prepared for if it was ever disrupted.
And that you'll be able to communicate to the shareholders, the
Yep.
executives, that this confidence is in place, not just through feelings, but through
Yep.
evidence, right? All
The,
right.
the other thing I want to touch
Yeah.
on very, very quickly that I think is important
Tell me.
is cyber insurance. So if we
Ah,
look at cyber insurance, like the checklists in the past,
yeah,
a few years ago, it was, do you have backups?
yeah.
We're now seeing the questions are far more detailed. It is, what is your backup policy? How often are backups tested, right? So in order to renew your cybersecurity insurance, that bar has been raised, and putting together this kind of a plan, having testing in place, is going to make, that cyber insurance renewal much smoother.
Good point. Good point. And you touched on cybersecurity, and I'm just itching to kind of bring this in, and I'm going to say it because you triggered me just now, Stephen. Um, is there a tight link between cybersecurity and backup and disaster recovery, Stephen? I mean,
Oh,
should
absolutely.
we be concerned when we're talking about backup and DR? Is it just really backup and DR, or tell me more about that
Yeah,
relationship?
yeah, absolutely. So first of all, nothing happens in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about a cyber attack, what they are generally trying to do is either get access to your data or deny you access to your data, and then get some kind of a
Or your
ransom
service.
for
Or
your
your
service.
service.
Correct,
Uh-huh.
or your
All
service,
right.
right? So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
so that, as a result, if you actually look at something like the NIST cybersecurity framework,
Yeah.
um, one of the key components of that is backup and disaster recovery. When you have an incident, having the ability to, while you're investigating and remediating it, to run those critical things we talked about earlier, to keep those going while you're mitigating an incident,
Mm-hmm.
much easier if it's part of your overall strategy. So, and not only that, but most of the time, even if you were to pay the ransom and get back, your data, it's
Mm-hmm.
not an instant thing. Decrypting data doesn't happen instantly. It takes time, and there's also a risk you're still going to lose some of that data. It may become corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, part of an overall cyber resilience strategy is having a
Mm-hmm.
good backup and disaster recovery plan in place.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Sort of the
Yeah.
last line of defense, right? Is you want to
Mm-hmm.
have, and it doesn't, it doesn't mean that just having backup and DR is a cybersecurity plan, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean having a cybersecurity plan without disaster and recovery is a complete cybersecurity plan. Really, in order to be properly prepared, you need to have people who are trained and aware of what the risks are. You need to
Mm-hmm.
have automated systems in place to be able to reduce the risks. And then you need to have a plan, and not only a plan, but a tested and validated plan in place that if there is an incident, that you can recover from that incident. And that's where everything kind of ties together. So, yeah, it is 100% intertwined.
So I'm about to go and bring up the backup and disaster recovery checklist that we have prepared for the audience. But lastly, I'm going to say, Stephen, earlier in the conversation, in earlier segments, you mentioned immutable backup. And at these kind of events, we don't assume that our users know what the terminology or the jargon is. So break it down for us. When you say immutable backup, what are you talking about?
So in the simplest sense, it's a backup that is unchangeable, right? So it is one that once it has been saved, nobody can go in and delete it or make a change to it to corrupt it.
Why is that important, Stephen?
Well, when you have we talked earlier about that synchronization spreading across devices, right? We talked about so if you have a corrupted or missing file one place, it'll go other places. With backups, what you want, especially in that cloud backups, you want it to be unchangeable. You don't want it to inherit those changes. You want it to be kind of a snapshot in time that said, hey, we did a backup on Tuesday at 11 a.m. and at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, all of the data that was there, that's going to stay forever until it runs out, right? Until how long I want to retain that data for, whether it's a week, a month, 10 years, whatever that is. And that means that if I ever have to go back, I know all of the data is there and I know that it's not corrupted. Because a lot of the times, as we talked about earlier, when you have a ransomware or a threat actor environment, what they're looking for is they want to deny you access to your backups.
The first thing they go in for once they infiltrate you is they're going for your backup, because they know that's the first thing you're running for when you find out there's a problem. So hence why immutable backups are important, right? So even if the bad actor get in and have his way or her way, they wouldn't be able to touch your backup and can't change or make it corrupt, because simply you have that technology enabled, right?
Correct.
Good. And then as I segue into the backup, just in case it wasn't clear to the persons here, and I don't shy away from this kind of conversation. I know there are other providers do, but we should start on the premise to say that there's no 100% protection from a cyber breach.
No.
Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And if that's true, it's more along the line as to when. And so equally important then is, what do you do when? And so if your what and how is so clear and is in place, then the stresses of life would be diminished significantly.
Yes.
Because since we're already going on the premise that at some point something might happen, we are saying, okay, bring it on. When it happened, I'm good. I'm set. When you don't have that confidence, that's the problem.
Yes.
All right. What an awesome conversation. But let me go over to my screen here, Stephen. I'm about to share. And I want to share, guys, the backup and disaster checklist. Earlier in this conversation, Marsha mentioned that this checklist will be shared with all the participants. It's just a guide to help with you navigating what you already have. I'm sure you have something, right? And I am sharing now, and hopefully we are seeing it. Anyone seeing that? 3210? Yeah. All right, great. So Stephen, let's go through this. So here is a checklist, and as it says, checklist, right? It's just to help you to either put something in or to help you to validate what you have. whichever, it should bring value to you, right?
Yep.
So we spoke earlier about the 3210 and what it means, right? We're going to go now. Hopefully this is big enough. I don't know. Tell me, is it big enough, or maybe I should do a little zoom? Is it good from your view? Yes? Are we good?
Could zoom in a little bit.
Yeah,
All
as I
right,
say,
let's try
I
that.
see a few people with their hands up
Okay.
too.
Uh,
Okay,
all right. So Marsha, you want to
good.
get to this and then
Yeah, let's get through
okay,
this. I see your hand, Ariel, and I think this
okay,
is major. We're gonna come
okay.
to you in a bit, okay?
All right, all right, good, good. All right, so we have a few points here. So why backup fail? You know, we spoke about that before, and we spoke about what the 3210 means and so forth, right? So the insight here is really a backup is only valuable if it can be successful. We touched on that. You don't have a backup as far as we concerned if it's not validated and tested, right?
Yep.
And then we have what is a quick self-assessment here. Just 6 questions. You answer these questions honestly. Yeah. Do you have this? Do you have this? Yes, no. If you're really not sure, it's fine. Put not sure. And pretty much, this kind of, give you a legend as to, if it was mostly yes, then, it's low risk. If you have a mixed bag, then it's in the middle, medium risk. And you have a lot of no, then absolutely you have a high risk. Yeah. Uh, so answer those questions honestly and see where you're at. And then when you look at the framework now, so just down here, we have the 3 copies of your data, and you can see there, just this expanding a little more on what you were saying, Stephen. And then on the 2 side, right, we have one on-premise, right, different storage type, cloud, on-premise, different kind of technologies, right? That's the idea behind it, yeah?
Yep.
And then the 1 means that we want to naturally, and I put this first, right, to have this one geographically offsite. So if you're in Jamaica, outside of Jamaica, if you're in Trinidad, outside of Trinidad, right?
Yep.
Whichever country, right? And 0, you touched on this a little bit. Yeah, 0, you touched on this a little bit, is the 0 errors, because having backups with lots of error is still a risk, true? So because at the time when you really need to call on it, maybe the error was yesterday or day before yesterday, then that's a risk too. So we want to have your error free, and we want to make sure those validations are done and tested, right? And so the important area here is to say, if you are not testing your backup, you're guessing. Boy, I don't know if we can stress this anymore. And then the 4-point here, fourth point is ransomware and modern threats. And hence why I kind of call this out a little more, because immutable backup is an important part of your strategy.
Yes.
Right. And so if you have backup and it's not immutable, some persons say air gaps. No, right? You want to be clear that you not just have a backup, but your backup is protected. Yeah.
Yes.
And we have a bunch of other stuff here that you can look into. And then on the 5th part now is your recovery readiness, because you can have all of these technologies and it's all good. You have checked the boxes and you're good. But when it's time, when the event comes and you have to declare a disaster, you are unsure. The business expectation is not aligned. Business expect that you should have a 15 minutes recovery point objective. But the truth is the technology you have in is 1 hour or 2 hours. So you have a misalignment there, right? So all of this you want to take into consideration. Alignment on the RTO, alignment on the RPO. Who is responsible for what? Who does what and when and where? Yeah. And that's the plan, the step by step that we're talking about, right? Are these tested, all of that kind of stuff, right? And we spoke about how we could do the simulation, and you could, use the modern technology to do the simulation. And so that's how the empowerment and the knowledge transfer would occur. And then the 6th point here, it kind of highlight these 3 areas again. And then it talked about the different kind of testing that you should be conscious of, right? The file level, the full system, you know, your integrity checks and so forth. And then on this table here, it's talking about the frequency. So we didn't talk much about frequency, Stephen. I mean, when do you do backup? Every hour, every day, every 2 days, weekly? When?
Yeah, it depends on what we were talking about, that recovery point objective, right? It talks about how often does the data change.
Yes.
But some other factors can also be involved in that. For example, you know, do you have a limited connectivity? Is there so? And as we were talking about earlier, not all systems necessarily have to have the same rules, right? You may have a system that is super critical and you need to update it maybe as often as once an hour, or maybe even once every 30 minutes, where another system daily or weekly updates are perfectly fine to that.
That's clear. And then thank you for that, Stephen. And then we have the 7 things, you know, just kind of pulling out some mistakes, so don't make those mistakes, right? And then the 8 area, just say where you are based on the risk chart here. And then the 9 and the 10 just pretty much saying, hey, if you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the skill set on the team, don't afraid to ask for assistance, right? And then what next steps would look like right there. So I want to kind of save on some time so we can get the Q&A in, Stephen. So at this point, Marsha, if you